All right, so um, again, that video that you just saw um, on racism and the issue of Haitians and Dominicans, I want you to kind of think about that as we explore other topics later on, and then we're also going to have a video on the Haitian Revolution. Um, in any case, now I'm moving on just to talk about political control of India by the British. And in this chapter here, it talks about this development. Keep in mind that India has always been predominantly Hindu, but at this point it was ruled by the Mughals, who were Muslim. Okay, and they're going to be displaced eventually, and we're going to see Britain really controlling India. So much so, think about film, especially if you've watched classic movies or are been into the classics. Think about The Secret Garden. Think about Shirley Temple movies. Think about Sherlock Holmes. Um, I can go on and on about many, especially British films and famous novels that take for granted the idea of the British being in India. Think about Rikki Tikki Taffy. What about the Jungle Book? Who wrote the Jungle Book? And what was his politics? Same who did Rikki Tikki Taffy. Um, I can go on and on. Rudyard Kipling I'm talking about. And he's the one that wrote a poem also called The White Man's Burden, celebrating the legacy of conquering people of color. But you have it so much so that when I was a kid growing up and I watched a lot of these, my mom loved these things. My mom always, she was politically neutral. She was a pacifist. She was against racism. She was against the idea of people dominating others. But we watched all these old films. I'm not even saying that they're bad to watch. But I'm really saying that I have to say, as a kid, I started to take for granted this idea of the British being in India, and kind of in a very natural way, like non-controversially, which is probably what functions help when you have a mass literature that came out of that time period, right? In any case, you go from having trade to then dominance, political involvement by East India Company to then colonialists getting killed as a pretext to then take control directly of British interests there. So that's all I want to say about this for now, because I kind of feel like I've made a lot of the points I've wanted to make. I want you to read up on this and kind of look further into it in the textbook. Again, here we have this map that talks about the British expansion into India, and we're going to see all the way up into World War II. I might mention this again. The British had India up until World War II. They took grain out of Bengal to feed British troops, and several million Bengalis died in a famine. And so the legacy of India in India is controversial, to say the least. So anyways, that's all I want to mention on this for now, and I think we'll have an opportunity to kind of explore some more about these topics later. Keep in mind, by the way, too, that Pakistan does not exist yet. Pakistan is actually a part of India. It's a Muslim majority area of India. Okay, so anyway, I just want to kind of point that out at this point. Now, it talks about in this chapter encounters between Europeans and Asians, and how it starts off being positive. I would say they exotified, right? So there was this mentioning of Voltaire, in his criticism of the Western Church, enamored with Confucianism, of Chinese philosophy is seen as a more practical system. There's an exotification of Hinduism, okay, and the art and wallpaper, and China becomes a big deal. I mean, I want you to just think about this for a moment. Let's take a look at, watch an old Sherlock Holmes flick, for example. I love Sherlock Holmes flicks, by the way, especially Jeremy Brett. I have to say, he was my favorite Sherlock Holmes. I like the new Sherlock Holmes, I'm not saying, but I like Jeremy Brett is my favorite, okay? He's dead now, may he rest in peace. Anyhow, but you watch the Sherlock Holmes and or just Victorian art era, 19th century style. We can go even now, but what do we have? A nice classical home, Oriental throw rug, made in China or the Middle East, Persian rug. We have tea. Where did the tea come from? What culture gave us tea? Was that growing in the in the British Isles? Is that, did you see King Arthur back then drinking tea? What about the art that you see in there, the wallpaper, and the kind of having a Buddha statue, or a Shiva, and I can go on and on and on. And I think if you really look, just every once in a while when you get a chance, maybe even Google, look at 19th century Victorian, like a home, especially of well-to-do. It's very exotic. It has all of these otherworldness things going on. It has, and they saw that as positive. But then over time, as they're starting to dominate more and more directly and become more and more into conflict with this part of the world, as your textbooks points out, there's going to start being seen a negative view about Confucianism, Hinduism, and just their overall system. As it mentions here that the Chinese people previously described in the West as white were now referred to as being non-white or yellow. So this shouldn't make us surprised then that we also think about people in the Dominican Republic who are dark-skinned and think of themselves as not being black because they're lighter. I mean, color is a relative thing in many ways, but it's interesting how that pans out. And what's also interesting is these racial theories that are going to develop later on are going to affect the way that these people, especially elites who are getting Western education, think about themselves. Japanese that study Western literature are going to be told that out of Asia, that the Japanese are a more superior, sophisticated type of Asian. And so some of them are going to read that and say, well, that racial theory works for me, right? I mean, China dominated us for centuries, but actually we're a superior race. Okay, I like this. This is kind of the stuff that's going to end up happening, okay? And this is also why I would argue in part that at least my personal experience that I know, for example, one Haitian in particular who has certain negative images about her body type based on an idea about what it means to be of African descent in a country predominantly of people who are of African descent. Okay, and so anyhow, I think this also explains a lot. I mean, think about this. Ronald Reagan was dedicating the Columbia space shuttle to the resistance in Afghanistan against the evil Soviets. Radical Islam was seen somewhat in a positive light, comparatively speaking, to many things. And look at the way it is in discourse now. Things change, political circumstances change with it. So, okay, so moving on from there. The Haitian Revolution, the American Revolution, we know a lot about. I hope so. it's significant to this. I want to say it's debatable if it's a revolution. I'll just say that. It's a war for independence, but it didn't turn over things in society like the French and the Haitians did. I'm not demeaning it. I hope it's not seen as that. You know, hit me up if you really want to have a question or a discussion about that statement that I just made, okay? I'm going to show you, I'm going to end this section with a documentary, a little crash course on the Haitian Revolution. So I'm going to skip that for now. And I just want to talk about a little bit the Irish Rebellion. Because remember I talked about the fact that Celts were faced first Germanic invasions that's going to end up creating the British Isles. If you've been following my documentaries and listening, I did talk about this. And there's this long-standing complication between the Celtic peoples and the Germanic peoples, or the English and the British Isles. The Scottish have their own issues to resolve with that. There's going to be, my last name is Pollock. It's a Scottish name. It's a lowland Scottish last name. And the founder of the clan apparently was an Anglo-Norman. Without getting too complicated, a lot of the clans that came into Scotland, especially in the lowlands, were not originally from Scotland, but then integrated with the locals and identified very much so, strongly so, as Scottish, and are so. And I've been at Scottish places where it's like you get this look: are you questioning, how Scottish somebody is right now? Even my own self. No, but. So there's this kind of Irish nationalism and Scottish nationalism that's happened, but there is this fact that there's been this kind of attempt of the English to control that island in many ways, and they brought in Scottish and English nationals into Ireland, who then also eventually saw themselves as Irish. But then you had the complications of the loyalty to the Irish people, especially the Catholic side of things, and that to the United Kingdom. And that's still not fully resolved. But really, the Irish are some of the first litmus tests of experiments for the British before they springboard onto other people. And then it's also interesting that, you take Andrew Jackson, who was Scots-Irish, and he's going to have racist views about black African slaves. And then you kind of think about the legacy of what the Irish faced in Ireland. Need I say more? Anyhow, so I hope you read that. The Irish Rebellion is not something you hear about a lot, but it does explain still a lot of things in a modern context. And then, of course, what's going on in Latin America, I want to talk about more thoroughly. I'm going to have to leave it at there, but just to say that as I was mentioning earlier, Latin American elites get tired of having to answer to Spanish elites in the same way that ours did. Simón Bolívar, a very interesting legacy, very important. In Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, the controversial leader who's now dead, created the Bolivarian Revolution, and trying to fight off U.S. influence in Latin America. This is modern times I'm talking about. And I think if you read the section and you look at the legacy of Simón Bolívar, you will then kind of understand why he would be conjured up in context to Latin American resistance to U.S. dominance of their region or those specific countries. And that's a whole other topic as well. Now, so I'm going to end this section here. I'm going to end having you watch this crash course on the Haitian Revolution. And we'll then move on to discussing more about the Enlightenment. If there's any questions about what I said, if there's a lot of things that are left out that I wanted to talk about, please contact me. I didn't do justice to the section of what I'd like, but in any case, I hope you found it informative and thought-provoking, especially as we weave it into Enlightenment period.